Welcome to the Outthinkers Podcast. Plug into fascinating minds and breakthrough ideas that are transforming industries and the world. I'm your host, Kian Krippendorf, founder of Outthinker Networks, a global think tank comprised of corporate strategists, innovators, and entrepreneurs that are shaping the future of business. If this describes you, join us at outthinker.com. Now, let's dive into this week's episode.
Now, often when we hear or we think of the story of the person who created something as magical as Lady Liberty, we assume that person who created it must have been a magical person who had magic in their mind to help them come up with the idea. He took elements that were familiar and appealing to him and combined them in a way that was unique. Nobody else would have came up with that combination, and that's what makes it a masterpiece in the sense that it spoke something to people. So innovation is a useful, novel combination of existing elements that come together to solve for a complex problem. It is the outcome of the creative process.
That was Sheena Iyengar, the St. Lee Professor of Business at Columbia Business School, my alma mater, where she has taught since 1998. A graduate of both Wharton and Stanford, she is one of the world's experts on choice and innovation, famously known for her JAM study, which transformed the way we think about products offered in the marketplace and how we curate them for customers. You may recognize her from one of her TED Talks, which have collectively been viewed nearly 7 million times. As you heard in the highlighted clip, Sheena is a masterful speaker and thinker on innovation. She opens our conversation with a fascinating take on how the Statue of Liberty was created, and she uses that to illustrate how, though it's seemingly a quality of just a few geniuses, actually, creativity and innovation are attainable by everyone. Sheena has published 2 books, The Art of Choosing, and her recent 2023 book, Think Bigger, How to Innovate, which has been hailed by the New York Times and the Financial Times, among others, as a must-read for business leaders. In this conversation, we delve into topics from these books and her work discussing the relationship between creativity and innovation and how one is the output of the other. 6 steps to think bigger and unlock innovation, which are, while incredibly powerful, also surprisingly practical and attainable. A few fascinating exercises you can employ with individuals to master the final 6th step, the third eye, as she calls it, in which you make sure that your idea translates to others. How AI will enhance our innovation capabilities as humans, not compete with them. And what I found, a fascinating view on what creativity really is. Hint, it's not about coming up with new ideas, it's about combining existing ideas in new ways. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheena Iyengar.
Sheena, thank you so much for being here. We have been working for quite a while to get you on the podcast. I'm thrilled that we got you to sit down for a little bit with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
I want to open up with the same 2 questions I always ask. The first is, if you can complete this sentence for me: if you really know me, you know that.
If you really know me, you would know that, yes, I'm blind, but I'm always doing things that people don't expect of a blind person. Some of my favorite things to do is to go biking on my tandem bike. And my significant other thinks I'm a shopaholic and that I might even have a gene that makes me addicted.
What do you like to shop for?
Clothes, shoes, jewelry. Love it. In fact, what I'm wearing right now is something I literally just bought last week when I was in Paris.
Lovely. And I'm just going to describe it. It looks like a very flowing, almost a pattern of the butterfly's wing of teal and orange and tan, because our listeners won't be able to see you. I love it. I hear as well, I've been listening to podcasts, that you also have your colleagues around you and people around you describing things to you a lot. So a lot of your language is very visual.
Yes.
Second question, and I ask this of all the guests, we always get a different answer. So whatever you say is perfect. What's your definition of strategy?
For me, it's just basic problem solving.
Huh.
Strategic thinking for me is simply, what's the problem and what's the solution that would solve that problem?
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to dig into that, what that process is of problem solving. I loved your book, Think Bigger. I do a lot of thinking about strategy. And my father was also at University of Pennsylvania, and he was a professor of communications, and his background was sort of social constructionism, but also human-based design and kind of how language shapes our thinking. So that's kind of the perspective that I enjoyed reading your work from. Could you just describe to me a little bit about this idea, and maybe if you don't mind telling us a little bit about the Statue of Liberty, because I thought your description of how the Statue of Liberty was designed really illustrates nicely this combination of known solutions in unique ways. That is sort of how I think of your approach.
So if you think about the economist who in many ways gave us the definition of strategy as it applies to innovation, it's Schumpeter, who talked about how innovation was, or every innovation, are combinations of existing ideas or existing elements. And that applies whether you're talking about art or science or a business idea. So let's take a very famous piece of art, Lady Liberty. She's obviously more than just a piece of art because she's come to mean something that's important, not just to New Yorkers, but Americans and even people across the globe. She's this iconic figure for more than the substance of her physical structure, but also for the idea. Now, often when we hear or we think of the story of the person who created something as magical as Lady Liberty, we assume that that person who created it must have been a magical person who had magic in their mind to help them come up with the idea. And so what I do in Think Bigger is I deconstruct and I say, look, anybody can come up with these ideas. In particular, if you look at the idea of Lady Liberty, how did Frederick Bartholdi come up with the idea of her? Now, we're not talking about his life story. We're not talking about all the challenges he went through to build her. We're just saying, what is the answer to the question, where did the idea of Lady Liberty come from? And so the structure, she's very big. He got that idea when he was in Egypt as a young man, when he saw the large statues guarding the ancient Egyptian tombs, the idea of a large lady. The crown comes from the Roman goddess Libertas, which would have been on a 5-franc coin at the time when he would have been building her. The pose of Lady Liberty was the pose that's very similar, reminiscent of La Verite, which was a painting that was hanging in the Museo d'Orsay at the time when he was building Lady Liberty. And the face about which, there's poems just written about the face of Lady Liberty, the inscrutable face, and that face is that of Frederick Bartholdi's own mother.
So he combines these elements that in isolation might be a natural solution, but it's the combining of these into something new that is the human creative act.
He took elements that were familiar and appealing to him and combined them in a way that was unique, right? Nobody else would have came up with that combination. And that's what makes it a masterpiece in the sense that it spoke something to people. And the whole was greater than the mere clunking together or collapsing of these elements. But he was just putting together pieces that were familiar and appealing to him.
I want to walk through the steps and Think Bigger. Before I get there, I just wanted to just kind of do some definitional things. How do you define innovation versus creativity?
So innovation is a useful, novel combination of existing elements that come together to solve for a complex problem. So it is very much in line with the definition of Schumpeter and strategy. It is the outcome of the creative process.
Would you mind walking us through the key steps in the Think Bigger process?
So the 6 steps are, it starts with choose the problem. right? You might think that that's self-evident, but it's actually often that's where people actually fail, is because they think it's self-evident and they end up solving the wrong problem. As Einstein once said, if I had an hour to save the planet, I would spend the first 55 minutes thinking about the problem and the last 5 minutes thinking about the solution.
Right. Love that quote.
So step one is that. Step two is really building on step one, which is breaking the problem down, because there's many, many reasons why a problem often exists. So breaking it down to its most important sort of challenges or subparts so that you're clear on what are the pieces of the problem you need to solve for. Step three is compare wants. And that's really asking you, before you start generating solutions, it's asking, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what does success look like for you? Or more precisely, what does success feel like for you?
Tell us more about, why do you mean, because when I think definition of success in a business context might be 13.3% revenue growth next year.
Yeah, so it feels like I'm wealthy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, so you want to go with the feel rather than the number, because then you can lose sight of the fact that there are multiple paths to getting to that same feeling. You might stick yourself onto one path and ignore other paths because you got so fixated on that number.
Love it. Yes, there's Zen koan about a monk asking another monk what Zen is, and he points at the moon and he says, the older monk says, I can't tell you what Zen is because you're going to think it's the finger. The finger is the pointing at the moon. And so I guess the emotional part allows us to...
It gives you more options.
More options and more paths to that. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. So that's compare once.
Step four is, so now you're ready to start the process of generating a solution. And that starts by you having to search for what others have done when solving the problem. Now, we all know to look in industry. That's our common practice. But I tell people to search in and out of the box. That means go to other boxes, go to other domains, go to other industries, and see how they're solving analogous problems. And essentially learn the best practices from totally other places and, revise and edit and import them into your problem.
Interesting. So when we are looking at solutions inside our industry, they're likely to look like best practices, which are best adopted practices, the way that other organizations like us or other people in our domain have solved the problem. So we're more likely to lead to solutions in the domain that are similar to what's already been. And so what we're doing is we're looking outside in another box at a best practice that's not a practice here, bringing that in. Is that sort of how you would describe it in a business context?
Sure.
That is brilliant. Okay. And just to be clear, so we're taking things that we've searched out as solutions. We haven't yet at this point created a whole new solution.
No, you're first collecting the different ways in which analogous problems have been solved. And you're collecting that material because you want to have all the useful bits that you need before you start generating or creating a solution.
I see. That's a very important distinction. I hope that listeners understand that. That was a big aha for me. Yeah.
Well, most of the time what we do is once we think we understand the problem, we just start generating solutions.
Right.
We think our work is done once we've broken down our problem and understood it or did an analysis, but actually your work is not done. There's another very, very important phase, which is go out and see how have others solved these sorts of problems.
Is there a similar going out there in the earlier stages of, say, choosing the problem?
No.
No. Okay.
No, the first three steps are really within industry. You really want to understand what it is. So you're trying to fix journalism, what happened in the past, what worked, what didn't work, why do we have this problem of, let's say fake news. That happens to be something I have to talk about later today. So I'm really trying to understand what are the causes of it. And if we were to have non-fake news, how would that feel like? It'd feel like everybody's, let's say, trust the news. All of that is understanding my industry. In the process, I will learn the best practices that have existed, hopefully, in my first three steps. And if I didn't, that means I did a pretty lousy breakdown of the problem, right? And now we're saying, okay, well, how have other worlds? I mean, look, let's say fake news. Journalists are the only people that have ever had to deal with being given false information. There's plenty of other industries that have had to deal with it, whether you're talking about like church, politicians, different sorts of historical, like hierarchical, kings, detectives, spies. I mean, there's all kinds of domains in which you worry about that.
Fascinating.
What were their best practices?
Right. And it's the breaking down of the problem
that enables you to know where else you can search.
Because now those new sub-problems are no longer framed within the existing problem. They become whatever cross-industry problems.
Absolutely.
Got it. Brilliant. Okay. So we've chosen the problem. We've broken it down. We've compared once. We've searched in and out of the box. And then what's the next step?
Now I've got all these materials that I've learned about as ways in which I can solve my problem. Now I take all those pieces, just like Frederick Bartholdi did, and I ask my mind to imagine different ways in which I can combine those pieces. And there's multiple ways in which I can combine the same pieces. I mean, that's the beauty of imagination, right? It's endless. We have an endless supply pack of different ways in which we can imagine what could be done with the same pieces, whether it's pieces of art, whether it's ingredients to make a dish, whether it's a set of words to make a sentence. Our imaginations give us so much possibility with even a constrained set of materials. So step 5 is what we call choice mapping. And that's when you take these choices or these options and now you're combining and recombining.
I love it. So we're going to get to the 6th step, the third eye, which I'm really interested in. But just to sort of bring it to the way I think of it, I've described what I'm thinking. Tell me, I might be way off, but I'm kind of thinking if I want to design a business model, I'll think about the components. I need a pricing strategy. I need a placement, distribution. I need processing operations. I need a monetization model and what need I'm going to solve. I've got all these different components. There are lots of different business model frameworks. Mm-hmm. And then in each of those, I might think of 5 different ways to price and 5 different ways to distribute. And now here I'm mapping them together. And I'm saying if we distribute like a computer company, but we price like a water bottle company or
Correct.
something like that.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Got it. Okay. And then this 6, I thought we were done. When I read this, okay, we're done. We have the Statue of Liberty now, but we have the 6th step, the third eye. What is that?
Well, what we tend to do is once we have an idea, we're so excited that we run out and prototype, or we just immediately go out and ask people, do you like it? And that's actually useful information. People don't know what they like or dislike. We don't even know if when they say they like or dislike, if they're actually seeing it the way you intend for them to see. Because we don't know yet if what you're seeing in your head is what people would be able to perceive. And so the third eye is, do you see what I see? It's a unique form of collecting feedback, where instead of asking people, do you like or dislike, I go out into the world, I present to you my idea, and I ask you, how would you present this idea? If it were you, how would you present it? Now, really what I'm doing is I'm engaging you in the exercise of imagination. And in the process of asking you to represent my idea back to me, I'm observing what's stuck. What were the holes in my idea? And what did you do with those holes? Did you fill them in? If so, how did you fill them in? Did you just skip over them? Maybe they were unnecessary. Maybe you came up with something totally different from what I intended. And maybe that tells me I need to revise so that you better understand. Or maybe that enables me to see other pathways to my idea.
Got it. So, you teach a class at Columbia Business School, one of my alma maters, where you go through this process. Can you just give an illustration of what do you do with students with regard to the third eye?
So the way I first get them to get the hang of it, and these are just fun, playful exercises. You can use them as little warm-ups in your company, as like the beginning of a meeting. But it's a great way to just give them a little experience of the third eye. So I'll start by doing a quick warm-up so that you can see the difference between what you see versus I see. And so that warm-up is I'll tell you, hey, I want you to write down in words 2 sentences giving me instructions on a dance move. Now, you cannot perform the dance move. You can only write down in words instructions to me. And so let's say you give me your instructions. Now, I read them. I have to perform them, and vice versa. Okay, it's a little embarrassing, but what's great is you do this in 5 minutes, and we immediately see that what we thought was so crystal clear in our instructions, really, it's so easy for the other person to interpret it in an entirely different way. Okay, so that's the first exercise. That's just showing them the gap between what's in our head and what others will perceive. Then the next thing I do is I do what we call the word tournament. And the word tournament is, I tell you, because, the English language generates new words every year, an average of about 1,100 words a year. And so I say, hey, just come up with a word for something that doesn't exist right now. It could be anything. I don't know, like the fact that I tend to use my hands a lot. Let's just say, I come up with a word like, you give me a word, hand something.
Handful movement.
Okay, handful movement, okay? And so I have to jot down my word, handful movement, and I have to jot down my definition when I don't know what to do with my hands and I keep moving them. Okay, let's just say I said that, right? Handful movement. So now what I do is I've got my word and I got my definition. Now I'm going to go up to, we usually have in class, because we're just, obviously we're doing it for instructive purposes, for about 8 to 10 people. And it doesn't take very long. It's just a word. I walk up to you, I give you my word, and you tell me what definition comes to mind. So I say half a movement, and you say, whatever you think it is. And then I go to the next person, and I go to the next person. And what I'm doing is I'm listening to their definitions, and I'm collecting those up. I don't ever tell them what definition I had in mind. And now, after I've collected this, now what I do is I have an opportunity to edit my word or my definition or both. And now I submit that word and definition to a tournament where a different set of people judge and decide which word they could imagine themselves using in the future. And it turns out that the people who actually were willing to revise their word and definition are more likely to win.
Oh, wow.
And so I believe this is a method by which we can can take our ideas and edit them in a way that makes them much more sticky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I'm hearing, what you're saying is Csikszentmihalyi had this, probably not his concept, the big C and little c creativity. And big C creativity is the innovation. And, the idea that, as you were said at the very beginning, that something around like for an innovation, to be an innovation, it's the combination of the creative act. And I guess ultimately it's sort of in the eye of the beholder, right? It needs to be adopted by users or by people for it to actually be an innovation. So you've now shaped it, I guess, informed by how people react to your innovation. Is that?
Yeah, well, you're learning other ways to think about it. You're learning how to edit it. You're learning what part of it is sticky, what part of it is actually not sticky, so in which case you might want to discard that part.
Okay, perfect. There are 2 important questions I'd love to just maybe get your quick reaction to. You have said that you see AI as being an accelerator of human creativity. I was recently in a meeting with a group of chief strategy officers talking about AI and how it's used. And I think what one thing that popped out of it was this questioning, how could a machine be creative? This thing that used to be just what humans could do seems to do parts of it better than we do. How do you see AI slipping into the creative process of a human? Or how do you see it interacting with humans?
So I think it will over time be an aid. And when you think of the camera back in the 19th century, we thought it was going to kill art. Instead, what happened was that it gave rise to Impressionism, because by seeing what the camera could produce so fast, so cheap, so precise, artists began to realize that what they could do that was different was show people how the ordinary could be extraordinary. So they're showing people new ways to see, right? Which gives you the rise of Impressionism. The camera also became an important tool or piece of technology for showing people the so-called truth with journalism, but it also became the tool for so-called distortion. And I think AI is kind of doing the same thing. It's just far more sophisticated. So ultimately, is it a tool that artists will use? You're already seeing that. There's some beautiful examples of how artists are using AI to really help them reimagine all kinds of things like color, like what's going to happen to our environment as a function of different kinds of climate-related disasters, and all kinds of things that artists are doing in collaboration with this aid. When you look at social media, you look at the news, you look at companies and how they're using AI for their employees, it becomes a tool by which you can improve your writing. So it's obviously more sophisticated than spell check. It hasn't yet gotten to the point where it can actually help you create something truly meaningful. Like if you're in a company creating a solution, it doesn't have quality control. It's kind of still banal and conformist and that kind of thing. But can it help you do a better job than Google at doing searching, at maybe finding things that wouldn't have been as easily available to you on your fingertips? Sure, if you become good at it. Just like no two people are as good at, quote, Googling it. No two people will be the same as, whatever, ChatGPTing it or Barding it or whatever the equivalent is. So I do think that's the future. Will you have to put laws in place just like you did for the camera? Absolutely.
Great. We could spend a whole nother hour breaking that down, but thank you for that very clear analogy. And last question, I'm going to cheat and combine two questions. What are you working on now? And how can people follow you and connect with you?
You should definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I post there every week, and I usually post interesting things. And in fact, today I'm going to probably post about the first example of fake news. Later today, yes, it happened in 1690.
1690, wow.
Yes. So you should follow me on social media. What I'm working on right now, which I'm really, really excited about, is, so you already know about the book, Think Bigger. I hope people will read it, and my main dream is to get people to use it. What I'm working on right now is I'm creating a digital toolkit to go along with that book so that anybody can apply Think Bigger. I don't want people to just read it and talk about it as a concept. I actually want people to use it to solve all kinds of problems. And so to make it easier for people, I'm creating a digital toolkit so that as you're reading and doing it on the, on the platform, you will actually have a tool that enables you to fill it in. You can plug and play ChatGPT to help you as you're going along. So it will be an interactive tool. That's what I'm working on. I'm hoping to roll that out by the spring.
Amazing. Well, when you do, please let us know and we'll share it here.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I wish we had more time with you, Sheena. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for making it so accessible for the rest of us. And thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guest. Thank you to our executive producer, Karina Reyes, our editor, Zach Ness, and the rest of the team. If you like what you heard, please follow, download, and subscribe. I'm your host, Kyan Krippendorf. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you soon with another episode of Outthinkers.